Deputy Speaker, I'm glad to speak about the importance of vocational training in Australia and about TAFE in particular. I have to say the motion itself seems at odds with what's actually going on in Australia. It seeks to superimpose a cheery picture over what in reality is a fairly bleak set of circumstances. When it refers to how the government wants to reform the vocational sector to meet the demands of the modern Australian economy, you can only decode that as meaning the government thinks that squeezing our TAFE system and drastically reducing the number of apprentices is just what this economy needs. That would seem bizarre, but this is the same government that reckons the way to respond to stagnant real wages and falling living standards and weak consumption is to cut penalty rates, cap public sector wages, cut public sector jobs and wage a constant war against the union movement. So if that's your assessment of what the economy needs, then the attack on TAFE and apprenticeship starts to make perfect sense. Deputy Speaker, as the Australian Bureau of Statistics makes clear, this Liberal National Coalition is presiding over the worst wages growth on record, with wages growing at 1/5 the rate of profits. Its economic policies have doubled the national debt and lifted household debt to record levels, and there are nearly 2 million Australians looking for work or for more work, even though in some areas there are significant skill shortages. Now, a properly supported vocational framework would be connecting those two areas of need: businesses who want skilled workers and Australians who love to be trained in the skills that would enable them to take on those jobs. What this motion doesn't acknowledge in talking about the government's newfound enthusiasm for the vocational sector reform is that for 7 years the government has actively run down the sector itself. Reform in this case is code for how the hell do we glue the system back together after we've already smashed it into several pieces. Deputy Speaker, consider that under Labor there were never fewer than 400,000 apprentices and trainees. Today there's maybe 170,000. 7 years of so-called stable and certain government, the number of apprentices and trainees in Australia has been chopped in half. At a time of high youth unemployment and with a government that constantly says the best support it can provide is a job, we find ourselves in a situation where Australia has a shortage of plumbers, carpenters, hairdressers and motor mechanics, and air conditioning mechanics apparently. It's no great mystery as to why. The biggest reason we have shortages in such basic and critical skill areas is because the government's cut $3 billion out of the TAFE system, $3,000 million out of our TAFE system. You can't do that. You can't take that much money out of TAFE and then blame young people for not being adequately trained. Deputy Speaker, I want to acknowledge the vital role that TAFE plays across the nation, but including those that serve my electorate of Fremantle, like the WA Maritime Centre and the Murdoch TAFE campus. At the end of last year, I visited the WA Maritime Centre with Labor's Deputy Leader, the Shadow Minister for Defence, and thanks to TAFE, WA is home to world-class training facilities for people seeking careers as seafarers or in the defence industry or in shipbuilding and sophisticated manufacturing. Last February, I was proud to sign the pledge calling for guaranteed funding for TAFE, and I want to pay tribute to the Stop TAFE Cuts campaign and to the State Schools Teachers Union of WA for their important work in this area. Deputy Speaker, while the Morrison government has turned its back on TAFE, I want to acknowledge the supportive work of state governments in this area. The Victorian, Queensland and Western Australian governments have all realised there's a crisis and they've taken steps to address it. As the member for Perth pointed out, the McGowan Labor government put a freeze on all TAFE fees in 2017. This year they've cut TAFE fees in half for 34 priority courses. That's having an impact with a 20% increase in TAFE enrolments across those courses, and in some areas, like cybersecurity, enrolments have increased by 85%. That's what good governments do. They identify problems and they take practical action. Deputy Speaker, after 7 years of this Liberal National Government, our vocational education system has taken an absolute hammering. It's sad but understandable that some Australians have lost confidence in the system or are finding themselves locked out through higher fees, course closures and even the closure of some TAFE campuses. That's what billions of dollars of cuts does. That's why we've got a skills crisis that makes life hard for businesses, that leads businesses to call for more access to temporary foreign workers. Yet with almost 2 million people out of work or looking for more work, it shouldn't come to that. The truth is that TAFE can and should be an engine for opportunity and productivity in this country. Well-structured, properly resourced and high-quality vocational education helps to create jobs, boost wages, grow small business and let Australians of all ages, but particularly young people, get on the path to a productive and fulfilling work life.